The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to a new edition of Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. I'm your host, as always, Billy Donnelly, who you can find at This Is Infamous. And as usual, this is a wrestling podcast that puts perspective, logic, and reasoning into the discussion about professional wrestling. No fanboy speak aloud. Thanks for bearing with me this week. Under the weather. So I'm going to power through this hour of what's been new in the world of professional wrestling as they overcome a stuffy head, a sniffly nose, a raspy voice, to make sense of everything that's going on in professional wrestling, particularly this week in the WWE as we head towards their first brand distinct pay-per-view / special event, Backlash. A couple other points of business to get to throughout the show as well, which we will. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with Paige this week and her current situation with the WWE. But I think we'll start off outside of the WWE realm and enter the world of MMA just for a few minutes to kick off the show. In particular, to talk about the UFC debut of Phil Brooks, better known to all of us as CM Punk, this Saturday night in Cleveland at UFC 203. Now, I understand a little bit that the interest, the hype, has died off some for CM Punk's first foray inside the Octagon. We remember CM Punk's signing with UFC was many months ago. And his debut in the UFC, or at least the idea of when CM Punk would debut in the UFC, has been delayed repeatedly, pushed back repeatedly, until he was ready. Because as a paying customer, a patron of any UFC event that requires you to lay out your money, the UFC does not want to present a sideshow. The UFC does not want to present a novelty act. The UFC has a responsibility to both itself, its own integrity, as well as to those who are laying out the money to buy their events, to buy tickets, to buy pay-per-views, to present a competitive product, a product that, for all intents and purposes, will give you value, entertainment value for your dollar. And if CM Punk wasn't ready, CM Punk wasn't properly trained, if CM Punk wasn't on the level to give you a competitive bout inside the Octagon, then what the hell was going to be the point? I mean, do you really want to lay out all that money to watch CM Punk get decimated? Or do you want to lay out all that money in the hopes of seeing CM Punk in a good fight? So now CM Punk is, I guess, about as ready as he's ever going to be to debut, and will step into the Octagon this Saturday. And I, for one, will be watching. I, for one, am quite interested. And I'm not a CM Punk hater. I'm not one of these idiots running around talking about how CM Punk betrayed me or quit or left me behind. CM Punk is entitled to do whatever it is that he wants with his life. Whether that's step into a wrestling ring, step into an octagon, write comic books, whatever he wants. And if the opportunities are there for him to do so, he should take advantage to his heart's desire. Whatever it is that makes him happy. As a wrestling fan, as a wrestling commentator, CM Punk owes me not a damn thing. Not a damn thing in this world. I enjoyed watching CM Punk as a wrestler. I enjoyed watching CM Punk as a WWE superstar. But that doesn't give me any ownership over what CM Punk decides to do with his past, present, or future. We'll always have those good times. I'll always have those memories. I'll fondly remember the pipe bomb promo. And I wish CM Punk well in the UFC. I hope he puts up a good fight. I hope he wins. I hope that the UFC gets some sort of return on investment with their time spent, their patience with CM Punk, so that we can see him do it again. I'm not rooting maliciously against CM Punk for what I feel is some sort of slight against wrestling for him leaving. He left because he wanted to leave. It was time for him to go. He didn't love it anymore. He didn't have the passion for it anymore. He didn't want to be in it anymore. I'd rather a guy have that as part of his legacy than somebody who just sort of sleptwalked through things because they were afraid of changing things up. Bravo to CM Punk for having the guts, the balls to walk away from what was a ton of money, I imagine, with the WWE to see if he could step into the Octagon and fight. And I wish him well against Mickey Gall this Saturday at UFC 203. I hope when the fight is over, his hand will be raised high in triumph. And I hope this would be the start of us being able to see more CM Punk do something else. Because I've loved what he's done in the past. And I'd like him to have a new outlet to continue to be the guy that we're all drawn to for so long to begin with. So those are my thoughts on CM Punk debuting in UFC this Saturday in Cleveland at UFC 203. So if you want to grab that one on pay-per-view, that will be available for you. Don't steal it. Watch it legitimately. Go to a bar who's showing it. Have a few drinks. Get some loaded potato skins in you or something. Some wings. Watch CM Punk's debut the right way. All right, let's also talk about Paige while we're at it. While we're sort of outside the Raw and SmackDown realm for a few minutes. And just sort of discuss what's going on there. Now, there are all sorts of rumors, and I try not to dip into rumors too greatly on the show, because once again, this is intelligent wrestling conversation. This isn't rumors and speculation. This isn't guessing. But there is a pretty substantial word going around that Paige's time in the WWE is short. That coming back from her wellness policy violation, her suspension, we may not be seeing Paige in the WWE too much longer. Whether it's a release, whether it's a sort of mutual separation, a agreed upon future endeavored circumstance, we're not necessarily sure at the moment, but it doesn't appear that Paige will be hanging around Titan Tower too long. And her relationship with Alberto Del Rio outside of the business has been talked about at length by a number of people. Once again, I don't care. You know, date who you want to date. Fuck who you want to fuck. Love who you want to love. Whatever. It's none of my business. It has no bearing upon my life. If they found a bond, a connection that works for them, more power to them. I'm not going to be like one of those wrestling fanboys who had delusional fantasies that one day Paige was going to see them and fall madly in love with them, and that was going to be the end of it. But as it pertains more to the Paige situation with the WWE, you know, this is, it's unfortunate. Sort of where Paige is in the WWE landscape. He's only 24 years old. Still relatively a baby in a number of ways. As far as the WWE is concerned. But let's also not forget that she's been in the WWE machine for a number of years. And even though she is still incredibly young, I think that they, over time, have done a disservice to Paige's value within the company that has put both them and her in this position where she is expendable if that's going to be the way we go. When Paige was called up from NXT, there wasn't really a lot for her to do. We sort of had this frenemy relationship going on with AJ Lee, but beyond that, there wasn't really a lot of wrestling talent on the main roster at that time who could sort of work the style that had been working down in NXT. Now remember, Paige is sort of the transition towards what the women's division currently looks like in the WWE, but she also wasn't necessarily a part of that quote-unquote women's revolution. She was working with Emma for the most part down in NXT. The BFFs a little bit, but it was nowhere near the top game that the likes of Charlotte and Bayley and Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch worked after she departed NXT. She left NXT and a new era of NXT women were down there in developmental, the Four Horsewomen, who took that start, that ignition, to another level. And so I think Paige in a number of ways was sort of before the time of women's wrestling on the main roster. And as a result, has gotten lost in the shuffle in a number of ways. Hasn't had the opportunity to really get into things with Charlotte and Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks and Bayley. It was part of that PCB tandem at the beginning of the women's revolution, but as we all know, that was a failure. Sticking all these women in groups together was a failure. Not allowing them to be individuals was a failure. And the WWE is course corrected in a number of ways to make their women's wrestling division meaningful, make it matter much more than they had in the past. And so there's been some damage done to the perception of Paige, I think, over time, because Paige never really had the opportunity to ground herself in this new women's division. suffered through an injury, now through the wellness policy violation. It's been sort of a mess. Now, if this is a situation where Paige and the WWE are going to go their separate ways, then I do wish Paige nothing but the best of luck in the future. I think she's still young. She's a wrestling lifer. It's in her blood. It's in her family. That she'll find her own way. And one day down the line, maybe she could return to the WWE. As a more mature woman who's got a feel for the business a little bit more, understands what's going on and what's being asked of her as being a part of this big global machine. But I don't think this is the last we've seen of Paige and the WWE. I would certainly hope that they might be able to reconcile some differences. But with Alberto Del Rio reportedly on the way out, and her relationship with that gentleman going strong, I guess, sometimes you got to follow your heart. You know what I'm saying? It's not my place to decide what other people should do with their life. And if her choice is to sort of walk away and leave and maybe see what's going on there, well, it's her life. She can do whatever she wants. So we'll monitor the Paige situation with the WWE closely. We'll bring you the latest, obviously, on future podcasts once we get some more clarification as to what might be going on there. But call it a hunch. I don't think we'll be seeing Paige around the WWE too long, or too much longer, which saddens me, as I think there's so much potential being left on the table there in that relationship. Speaking of potential, interesting way to segue. Let's talk about the WWE's programming this week, particularly Monday Night Raw and followed by SmackDown Live, as they build in their go-home program towards this weekend's pay-per-view of Backlash. Let's start off with Monday Night Raw and what happened on that show before we break things full circle towards SmackDown and the pay-per-view this weekend. There was a renewed sense of interest in Monday Night Raw this week following the crowning of Kevin Owens as the brand new Universal Champion to close out last week's show. Talked at length on last week's episode about how solid that Fatal 4-Way Elimination match was on last week's Raw, the benefits that it gave to each of the four participants, the reasoning why you might choose to put the belt on Kevin Owens at this point, and the opportunities moving forward that said new champion gives you. So if you missed out, be sure to double back, catch up, and bring yourself up to speed. But with those events transpiring to close out last week's Raw, it made Raw now must watch. What's going to happen next? Triple H came down. He interfered. He interjected himself into the Universal title picture. He clearly picked a favorite. What does this mean? What does this mean for the story that they're trying to tell? And so now Raw became a must-watch. And I thought, to start off, this week's Monday Night Raw was some seriously compelling television. Number one, they start off with this solid opening package to make last week's show ending feel incredibly important, which it was. But you gotta double down on that and inform people why this event was so epic, so earth-shattering. Hype it up accordingly, and people will believe. So I thought that there was a solid opening package to start off Raw. Then the other part of Monday Night Raw now is that it opens with an earlier tonight interview or backstage segment. And there were a number of these throughout the night. Some earlier today, some backstage pre-tapes that I thought were real great use of conveying information the WWE wants to get across to its universe, to its audience, and doing it in a timely fashion. This wasn't people going into the rings with microphones and ranting and rambling for 15 minutes and sort of bringing things to a screeching halt. These were segments that had purpose. So whether or not they were interviews or sort of promos against opponents or backstage segments that would inform why a match might be happening or forwarding somebody's issue with somebody else, I thought they were real efficient uses of time. They were quick, they were to the point, they were efficient uses of time. Showed that less can be more in the WWE. Showed that you don't need to say the same thing 8 different ways and pound it over your audience's head for them to get the point. You just need to stay on track, have a clear, concise message. And simple can be better. So you had this real good interaction between Mick Foley and Stephanie McMahon where Mick confronted Stephanie over what happened last week with Triple H's interaction, with his interference, so to speak, and how it made him look like a fool. And how Stephanie's refusal to sort of communicate about it over the course of the week has led Mick Foley to have some doubts about their relationship moving forward as sort of general manager and commissioner of Monday Night Raw. And Mick really put her on the spot about what exactly did she know and what could he believe. And I thought, this is very serious Mick Foley, not the cheap pop sort of jokester Mick Foley, but a serious Mick Foley. And a complicated Stephanie McMahon. Really made for some interesting TV. And added a nice wrinkle to their dynamic. Now, with Mick walking away, Steph had sort of this sly smirk on her face, which I thought, why give away any potential motive for her actions, or at least answer for what she knew so early? Because if she knows that Triple H was involved, why give it away out of the gate? Let that be revealed later. And that could further complicate their relationship even more. Let her play it on the level for a while. We don't need that extra look to reinform us that Stephanie is a bad guy, a villain of sorts. It's more interesting if we don't know. There's sort of gray area. If we're left to doubt, maybe Stephanie didn't know. What does that then mean for her relationship with Triple H? See, there's a number of different ways you could play it. But I thought at least the interaction, minus that final shot, was really strong. Now, in addition to that, I also thought they had a strong in-ring segment following that opening earlier today with Mick and Stephanie. And that involves sort of Kevin Owens' celebration of being the new Universal Champion. Kevin Owens came out in a suit. They had some balloons. Kevin Owens got to talk some smack. And, in true heelish manner, turned the adoration of the fans against them. Saying that he doesn't need their chance if you deserve it. When he has such a honor bestowed upon him because he knows it. And he doesn't need the fans to make that moment about them and their chants. When it's his moment. And he knows damn well more than anybody that he deserves the Universal Championship. So I thought one of those really good ways for a heel to stay heel, try not to be cool heel, but just heel. And saying, you can cheer for me all you want, if you feel the need to, fans, but I don't need it. Rather than sort of soaking it in and playing a tweener. You know, Kevin Owens' role as a heel is to want to have babyfaces defeat him for the title. Not to sort of split the crowd into who entertains them more. But with that, and Kevin Owens getting to gloat over his new championship, Seth Rollins comes down to the ring with a purpose. And this is why I thought this was a truly great segment to open Monday Night Raw with, is you had a passionate, pissed off Seth Rollins coming to the ring angry, infuriated about being wronged last week by Triple H. About feeling betrayed from his prior relationship with Stephanie McMahon. There was a purpose to his words. There was a purpose to his actions. And I thought this Seth Rollins was dynamite. And if you're going to now do sort of a face turn with Seth Rollins, this gives him something that the fans can identify with, something that resonates with the WWE Universe, something that they could back, that they could rally behind, because they understand the reason why Seth Rollins is as mad as he is right now. They may not have agreed with it before, because they hated Seth Rollins as a heel. But now as a babyface seeking some sort of justice, and that's one of the key components to a babyface, is seeking justice. You can have gray area all you want, but justice is important. They have now given Seth Rollins an instant connection with the fans who also want to see justice done in the WWE. Once again, another key component of being a babyface, key factor between the fans and the babyface, is that everybody wants justice to be done. Yeah, the bad guys are more fun. Sure, the heels can be cool to watch. There's something about rooting for the bad guy. But in the end, as it pertains to our suspension of disbelief as well as real life, we always want the bad guys to get theirs in the end, and for justice to be found by the good guys. So once again, really strong segment, because everyone in the ring, whether it was Mick Foley, Stephanie McMahon, Kevin Owens, or Seth Rollins, had a purpose to their words and their actions. Very clearly defined lines drawn. Didn't try to get too cute. Didn't try to over-explain. Didn't try to oversimplify. Just very basic. This is why I'm mad. This is why I'm happy. This is why I'm confused. Really solid segment to kick off Monday Night Raw. And there were a few other early segments that were pretty good. You had a non-title match between Bayley and Charlotte that I think is confusing to some people. Number one, I will tell you this about the match. Pretty good match. I thought, if you are a wrestling Padawan of sorts, you watch that match and you'll learn how to sell legitimately. Bayley did tremendous job selling Charlotte's offense quite well. Damage to the leg. And as a result, helped the crowd rally around this woman who is still fresh to a number of people outside of NXT watchers. But my one issue, and there's other people have the issue as well, and so I understand why. So I wanted to speak a little bit on it as far as why you have that match now between Bayley and Charlotte so quickly. Because Bayley's only been on the main roster, like 3 weeks or something like that, and already she's into a non-title match with Charlotte. And scoring a victory. Now, granted, it's by backfired Dana Brooke interference, but it's a win nonetheless. Now, the problem is right now that the women's division on Monday Night Raw has been sort of dealt a real big injury problem coming out of the draft. Paige injured, followed by wellness policy violation. Sasha Banks injured at SummerSlam, trying to recover and come back. You have some other women on the run. Nia Jax is up there, but Nia Jax isn't really primed for a spot against Charlotte. Right now, they're sticking her in squash matches, trying to get her over as this woman's monster. Clearly a heel persona, and not geared up for a match with Charlotte. So what do? You take the only babyface you have right now at your disposal, and I guess you stick her in a match with Charlotte. Now, I think you could do some other things there. Maybe more Bayley, Dana Brooke first as a way to, getting to Charlotte. Have Charlotte sort of play the I'm above all of this, rather than sort of sinking to the level of a challenger or a contender she does not believe has earned their opportunity properly. You could do some things there. And look, I love Bayley as much as everybody else. And I'm not necessarily a fan of this approach, because I think when you bring up somebody in this fashion and you start them out so high, there's nowhere for them to go but down. And I think one of the things with Bayley, which is another sort of comparison you could draw with Sami Zayn, is that they work best as an underdog. They work best as sort of this organic personality that has to rise up through the system, overcome these obstacles, and get people emotionally invested in them, buying into the struggle. So that when they do get their triumph, it's so much sweeter. It means so much more. I mean, let's remember, Sami Zayn and Bayley basically told similar stories down in NXT in their quest to become champion. Sami Zayn finally becoming NXT champion and defeating Neville had to overcome the obstacles of never being able to win the big one. Always being good, but never being great. And Bayley had a similar storyline told almost immediately following Sami Zayn's story, on showing that she was capable of being better than good. She could be great, and great enough to be champion. So I think a more organic approach to those characters is what helps. And so for that, I'm not necessarily a fan of throwing Bayley right into something with Charlotte, because I think having her work her way up is best. Letting the WWE Universe familiarize themselves with Bayley and giving them a true rooting interest in her, I think, is the way to go. Play the long game with these characters, not necessarily just going for short-term benefits. Once again, I understand why they're doing what they're doing with Bayley right now, because they feel like they have no other options, with Sasha being on the shelf, with Paige's future in doubt, And so Bayley's next on the totem pole. She's there. She's ready. Why not? I think you're missing out on the long-term benefits for quick, short-term games here. We're going to get a retooled, meaner Bo Dallas. Look, I'm always a Bo lever. We'll see where that goes. So that's something to keep an eye on. But at least Bo Dallas is getting TV time once again. Probably needs to change his outfit, considering there is no more Social Outcast, though. Really good one-on-one between Chris Jericho and Seth Rollins. That was a good, solid segment. Once again, as Seth Rollins sort of makes his face turn, stick him in there with Chris Jericho, who I think right now is top-notch again as a heel. We talked about this earlier. In earlier episodes about what a fan of Jericho I was not in recent history when he sort of came back, sort of playing up the old babyface 90s persona a little bit too much. Yeah, baby! Felt like somebody's dad holding on to the glory days for dear life. But as he sort of transitioned into this smug douchebag asshole heel persona, got to be a fan of Jericho once again. And I think his matches have gotten a little bit better. I thought earlier in the year, especially with the AJ Styles persona, it felt like his matches were almost in slow motion. Now I feel like he's hitting his stride again. Big fan of Jericho right now, and he's doing tremendous work. And we'll see what goes on now with Seth Rollins as a babyface. But I thought this match was really solid. Really good work. Sheamus and Cesaro. Interesting story being told here in this Best of 7 series. Sheamus goes up 3-love with this particular match. And once again works on the back of Cesaro. Repeated Irish Curse backbreakers delivered to Cesaro, which I thought was a really good spot. And an interesting story being told that I think can go in a number of ways. People look at this and they see one guy or another getting quote-unquote buried, and of course those people got their heads up their ass. But I think there's a really interesting story being told here between Sheamus and Cesaro because you're laying the groundwork for a Cesaro comeback. You're laying the groundwork for Cesaro to come back from being in such a devastating hole down 3-0 to potentially emerge as the victor and go up and win this thing with the monumental comeback, 4-3. Now, I know they had a match throughout this week in London now where Cesaro did score a victory and is now 3-1. But what you do is you build up Sheamus as sort of this cocky, smug, confident heel. The deck's stacked against Cesaro. How is he possibly going to overcome these insurmountable odds and win 4 straight? And yet as he gets a win, and then maybe gets another win, and then maybe gets another win, the confidence of Sheamus starts to become shaken. The pressure shifts from each match being one must-win for Cesaro to now the remaining matches being must-win for Sheamus. Or he risks his reputation being tarnished by blowing this lead. By blowing what seemed like a slam dunk, a walk in the park for him. And then when you get to that 7th match, that 7th bout in the series, you can go with Sheamus to win. In which case, him cutting off the Cinderella feel-good story of Cesaro gets him some heat. Or in having Cesaro win, maybe you have Sheamus snap. Once again, getting him some heat and being a sore loser. So I think a real interesting story being told there, and I look forward to see where they go with that as they continue through this best of 7 series, and ultimately to see how it ends up. Really good encounter between Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens backstage. That is the future of the WWE right there, if they can find a way to get Sami Zayn into a meaningful storyline currently. As it seems like once he's not engaged with Kevin Owens, WWE Creative has no clue what to do with Sami Zayn, other than just put him in a match. But I thought that was a real good interaction right there, talking about how Kevin Owens ultimately won the race with Sami Zayn, even though Sami Zayn was called into NXT first, called up to WWE first, debuted first NXT champion first. Kevin Owens being the Universal Champion before Sami Zayn ultimately finally gave him something to get over on Sami Zayn. Once again, that's a feud that we will never see the end of in the WWE, and I'm perfectly fine with that because I love watching both those dudes work against each other. Just another, once again, wrinkle to throw into their relationship with Kevin Owens now the champion, even though Sami Zayn won what was supposed to be the blow-off to their feud in their one-on-one match. Now, everything I've said about Monday Night Raw to this point has been pretty positive. That includes Bo Dallas coming back. And that took us right up to about 10 o'clock on the East Coast through Raw. So 1 hour to go. 2 hours in the books. Pretty solid. 1 hour to go. And then the wheels came off. Then hour 3 happened. And Raw turned into a dumpster fire clusterfuck of epic proportions that would leave you sort of shrugging with your hands up in the air going, what happened? Started with this never-ending, horrendous segment with Anderson and Gallows as these old fart coordinators or counselors or whatever the hell they're calling themselves, trying to retire tag teams with their next target being the New Day. So they had this segment where they brought out the old day. The New Day mimicked as senior citizens in one of the worst Raw segments I can remember in recent history. I mean, it was bad. Wasn't funny. Wasn't entertaining. Sucked the life out of the crowd. Sucked the life out of you sitting there watching it on your couch. It was horrible. Remember how I talked about these backstage pre-tapes and earlier today promos and segments that they'd scattered throughout the show to sort of make efficient use of their time? Well, this flew in the face of that strategy by taking what seemed like way too long to do way too little with way too much. I mean, this segment wouldn't end. It just kept going. And it never got any better. It was just terrible. I feel bad for Anderson and Gallows because I think they're so much better than what creative is doing with them now. I'd rather just Anderson remind me of his hot Asian wife every 5 minutes than this, reducing these two guys to testicle humor and old fart jokes. And the New Day, who normally bring some energy to the crowd, I mean, this is watching 8 guys drown and not having the power to stop it. I mean, to be forced to watch people drown right in front of you. This is a bomb. This is what we call bombing. If you were at like a comedy club and you watch a comedian get up there and just totally shit the bed, this was the equivalent of that. This was a bomb. And I hope WWE Creative took note of that. Took the right lessons from that. To never stick any of those people in a segment like this ever again. You had a pretty cool backstage segment between Alicia Fox and Nia Jax coming up. Stemming from Nia Jax's squash match over a friend of Alicia Fox, where Alicia Fox actually legitimately wailed Nia Jax in the face. You could tell by their reaction that was a shoot. No malicious intent involved, but everyone was sort of caught off guard by it. There's a GIF around it, which if you watch, you just watch it over and over and over and over and over again. That was one of the highlights of the third hour. Should speak volumes about the third hour. It also involved Titus O'Neil and Darren Young getting involved again with Bob Backlash. Oh, Jesus. See, this, I told you this third hour was atrocious. Braun Strowman gets in the ring with Sin Cara. Finally, not a clear squash match, even though we kind of know a squash match is coming. Because it's not like Sin Cara has been meaningful since, like, ever. So Braun Strowman actually gets into the ring with a name, and he gets a count-out victory? Oh, Jesus, it's just getting worse, isn't it? Then we get a Sasha Banks promo. And look, you know I don't like talking bad about Sasha Banks because I'm a 100% unapologetic Sasha Banks mark, but Sasha Banks goes to cut this heartfelt promo that supposedly is going to maybe lead to some bad news that she's been promoting, and you think that that means maybe this injury to her back is worse than originally thought. Maybe she's going to have to be on the shelf for a while. And it sort of meanders. It doesn't help that it followed awful segments in a row, so the crowd is sort of out of it. You're one guy who's chanting boring in the crowd, just disrespectful. But I thought it was a real sort of long-winded way to get to where they wanted it to be, which is that the boss is back. She's coming for Charlotte at Clash of Champions. And even with Dana Brooke stepping up to the plate, that was all for naught, as she was going to be sort of embarrassed for thinking that Sasha Banks was going to go out like that. Which is not a good Sasha Banks promo. Sasha Banks is fire on the stick if you give her the right motivation, the right material. She has something to work with. But to sort of tell like this long-winded story about the Divas Revolution and, you know, all the sacrifice to get to here, only then say that she's coming back, it felt like, the Mark Henry retire. Like, we've had too many of these speeches right now of people teasing that they're going to have to walk away only for them to turn around and say that they're perfectly fine and they're better than ever. So I thought sort of a creative misstep with Sasha Banks there. You had a main event with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, who once again I could watch forever. Match was fine. Not one of their stellar encounters, but always pretty good watching them go. But once again, I think that sort of their match was undercut by the fact that the rest of the hour was horrible. And a bit more into the hour, the match might have come across better. But because the hour sucked the life out of me, watching their match just felt like, it's all right. So it's fine. And then Roman Reigns showed up. And look, I'm not a Roman Reigns hater. But you have serious character flaws with Roman Reigns that you do nothing to try to correct. Case in point, Roman Reigns was also screwed last week in the Fatal 4-Way Elimination match for the Universal Championship. Roman Reigns was pedigreed outside the ring onto the mats by Triple H, thrown in the ring, and basically gifted an elimination to Seth Rollins. Roman Reigns was eliminated from his shot at the Universal Championship through no fault of his own. Seth Rollins came down to the ring right away to address his concerns, to air his grievances, to show he had a problem with how things went down last week. Roman Reigns, though, waits 3 hours. Roman Reigns comes down to the ring once again, cool as a cucumber, too cool for school. No emotion, no fire, no anger, no nothing. And gets into the ring to sort of silently confront Kevin Owens, which leads to Mick Foley coming out and granting Roman Reigns a match against Kevin Owens next week on Raw, in which case, if Roman Reigns wins, he will get into a triple threat match between Owens, Rollins, and then Reigns at Clash of the Champions. And they wonder why Roman Reigns gets booed. If Roman Reigns had some passion, Roman Reigns had something that people could get behind. Roman Reigns is pissed off that he got screwed. Yeah, Roman Reigns is pissed off. I hope he seeks justice, some vengeance. They'll get behind it. But instead, for Roman Reigns to just stroll down to the ring 3 hours after the fact, to not say anything and look unbothered by the whole circumstance. This is why you got Roman Reigns problems. This is why you have Roman Reigns problems. Let the guy emote. Something. That guy should be pissed. And he's not. He's like a robot. People can't root for an android. Can only root for human beings. And they have taken all the humanity out of this guy for people to feel any sort of empathy for him whatsoever. Another further creative misstep with Roman Reigns, once again showing they just don't understand how to make heroes and villains sometimes. Just don't understand. All right, I want to check in over on SmackDown. I thought SmackDown was an okay show. Nothing too special, even going into Backlash, which I thought was sort of disappointing. But yeah, Daniel Bryan opened the show with the SmackDown Women's Championship. Had a sort of Women's Championship forum scheduled, where all 6 participants in Backlash's 6-pack challenge for the SmackDown Women's Championship getting involved. And it just felt rushed. I mean, you have all 6 people that are stepping over each other, that are interrupting each other. I understand. You're trying to establish the talent that you have. Trying to establish Carmella. Trying to get Nikki Bella back on the radar. Get people familiar with who Alexa Bliss is. But in doing so, it all feels very rushed. You're trying to get 6 people over at the exact same time. And as a result, you get nobody over. You can't get 6 people over in one shot, in one segment. Or in another, or 2 segments or 3 segments where all 6 people are involved. You can get them over 1 at a time, or 2 at a time. Maybe even 3 at a time if you play your cards right. But 6 at a time doesn't work. So I understand you want the 6-pack challenge to give all the women a prime opportunity. Basically, your entire division a prime opportunity to capture the first ever SmackDown Women's Championship. But Carmella just called up. People don't know who she is. Alexa Bliss just called up. People don't know who she is. Nikki Bella coming back. People do know who she is, but they gotta, feel it out again. So I think they're still just doing a disservice to their women's division by trying to get them all over at the same time. And it's not helping. I mean, later they had a 6-woman tag with Alexa Bliss, Carmella, and Natalya versus Nikki Bella, Becky Lynch, and Naomi, and that's that's fine. You give them some time to work. You let people at least familiarize themselves somewhat with the women personalities. But at the same time, it doesn't really do a lot for your division when you have sort of these alliances. You have 3-on-3. They're going into Sunday to compete for one championship, and you have them hugging and having sort of sister power as if they're friends. No, they should be cutthroat. Knowing this is a tremendous opportunity they have. I'm interested in The Miz, Daniel Bryan, or actually The Miz and Dolph Ziggler at Backlash. You finally had The Miz and Daniel Bryan go face-to-face, exchanging some words this week, which I thought was a week too late, following their encounter on Talking Smack a couple weeks ago. I think as a result, it just didn't capitalize on the interest in the moment, and now the moment has passed. So sort of just a flat segment. Apollo Crews and The Miz was a fine match, I guess. You know, I think Dolph Ziggler and The Miz has... I think there's a potential there to elevate both talents to main event status, if you play your cards right. Because I think they're both very good on the mic. Ziggler's great at getting crowd reaction. Miz great at getting heat on himself. I think Ziggler can sell like nobody else. And I think this could be one of those truly fantastic intercontinental title feuds that help elevate everybody moving up on a roster that could probably use some more main eventers. So I'm interested to see what's going on there. I thought Crews versus The Miz was all right, but I thought Ziggler coming into the ring and holding the belt and The Miz sending in Maurice, his wife, to recover the belt rather than him do it himself. I thought that was a nice touch to sort of this idea that The Miz is soft, that he's a coward, so to speak, as they sort of build some heat behind this feud. The main event situation, which was an encounter between AJ Styles and Dean Ambrose, I thought was all right. I thought they had some pretty good mic work. I thought Ambrose, when he shows sort of that fire to him, is when he's at his best. But overall, I didn't think it did too much for me to get me all that interested in their match. I mean, I'm interested in their match to begin with because I love watching AJ Styles. They could get a top-notch match with anybody. I think Ambrose, when properly motivated and in the right mix with somebody, can have a stellar contest as well. I don't know that these two individuals, their styles necessarily make this match, even though I will never put anything past AJ Styles in putting forth. So I think on paper, it kind of looks like whatever, but in execution, it might be really, really good. But their encounter, I thought there was just something missing here leading into Backlash, I think, sort of this quickly after Ambrose disposed of Ziggler at SummerSlam and now is onto another program, and AJ Styles is still sort of talking about what happened with John Cena at SummerSlam rather than once again focus on the future encounter. So I feel like between the two of them, one has been sort of looking forward with Ambrose, the other has sort of been looking back with Styles, and as a result, I just don't know that this program has found the right level yet going into Backlash to register it as all that meaningful and compelling just yet. However, with that said, I think there was one real stellar segment on SmackDown that I want to talk about before we send you on your way, give you the go-home cue, and that is dealing with the SmackDown Tag Team title tournament in the semifinals. So in one semifinal, we had Heath Slater and Rhino versus the Hype Bros. Heath Slater and Rhino capture the victory. They're moving on to the finals to compete for the title. Heath Slater, competing also for a contract on one of the shows. And it just goes to show that even if you put somebody in a ridiculous gimmick as Heath Slater has right now, if you put a little time and effort into somebody's character, if you put a little time and effort into showing the audience that maybe there's something there, the audience will respond in kind. The WWE Universe has responded in kind to Heath Slater because they feel like he's been a guy that's just been overlooked. That's never really gotten his time to shine or his opportunity, so to speak. And now that he's getting his opportunity, as ridiculous as it is, people are getting behind it. So it just goes to show. TV time. Paying your dues. Trying hard. Effort. Goes a long way. But the other side of the coin was you had American Alpha versus the Usos. In what should have been a really solid contest, right? Give these guys some time. You can have an outstanding tag team match. Especially given how strong we've seen American Alpha work down in NXT. So you have an opening where American Alpha and the Usos come out to the center of the ring. They shake hands in a sign of mutual respect. And then as American Alpha retreats to their corner, the Usos sort of jump the gun, get started on the match, attack them from behind. So now you get some signs of a heel turn coming, some heel activity from the Usos. But very quickly, American Alpha manages to turn the tables. They managed to hit their finisher. They managed to shock the Usos in quick fashion and move on to the finals of the tournament. The Usos do not take this lightly and attack Gable and Jordan in the ring. Incapacitate Jason Jordan by throwing him into the ring post, and then they proceed to take out Chad Gable, working on his leg. Hit an Uso splash off the top, hit a jump kick to the back of the knee, and then as we learn on Talking Smack, eliminate American Alpha from their rightful place in the finals at Backlash. Now the plan is for the Hype Bros and the Usos, the two losing teams in the semifinals, to compete in a match at Backlash, and then the winner of that will go on to face Slater and Rhino in the finals for the title. Now we know this is custom made for the Usos to get over as a heel tag team and lay the foundation for American Alpha to have their sort of triumph later. Once again, in seeking justice against those who have wronged them. And so you could look at this and say, well, now look, American Alpha got screwed and they're burying the NXT team and blah. Remember, this is a story we're talking about here. And I think the way that they're telling this particular story is fantastic. A lot of potential for now a longer Usos American Alpha feud for those titles. And by taking American Alpha off TV for a little bit, you now are not overexposing them, but you're also drawing sympathy into what happened to them and then rallying your universe around their quest for vengeance and justice. And from that, you will have a heel tag team made as you transition the Usos from sort of stale babyface to now fresh heel. And you make American Alpha a true babyface tag team that now people have an interest, an emotional interest in. Because you want to see the Usos get their comeuppance at the hands of the team that they robbed. Really good storyline in the tag team division there. And on top of that, let me add one further layer. You help the Usos also get over as heels when they deny Heath Slater his shot at the tag team titles, as well as at a contract with SmackDown Live. That's how you get people to hate a tag team. That's how you get a heel over. Have them do heel stuff. And people will boo, they'll jeer, they'll act accordingly based off the storyline that you are telling them. Once again, Backlash this Sunday. We'll be back next week. Might just have an extra show just to break down Backlash for you. I think that's going to happen. So keep an eye out for that earlier in the week. And also, now, at this point in the week, make sure you hit us up on social media as I give you the go-home cue for the show. At the IWC Show on Twitter. At the IWC Show on Twitter. Keep a heads up for all the wrestling news that we want to bring to you. Keep you knowledgeable. Keep you informed. Also, we'll inform you anytime a brand new podcast is up for you to check out. So, at the IWC Show on Twitter. Also, follow us at Tiz Infamous on Twitter. At TIS Infamous. Tiz Infamous. That's for the mothership. This is Infamous for all our awesome content that goes up there as well. Make sure you add us to your timeline. And you can follow me, all my random ramblings and musings, my stream of consciousness put into the written word in 140 characters or less, at Infamous Kid. 2 Ds at the end. Infamous Kid on Twitter. Follow me there as well. Facebook, 2 pages for you to like. Facebook.com/TizInfamous. Facebook.com/BillyTheKid. Always interesting discussion threads going on, so participate, get yourself involved over on Facebook on both of those pages. You want to send me an email about the show, you can do that as well, theiwcshow@gmail.com, theiwcshow@gmail.com. Questions, comments, feedback, whatever, you send it, I'll read it personally, and if you got something of interest to bring up on the show, maybe I will. So make sure you put your name and where you're from, so you can be properly credited. Podcasts can be found wherever podcasts can be found. So I know you found this for this particular episode. But if you got a preferred podcast distribution model you like working with, you can find Intelligent Wrestling Conversation there as well. iTunes, Stitcher, Blueberry, SoundCloud. We're out there into the world. Google Play as well. So you make sure you follow us there, Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. All I ask is that you subscribe to the show so you never miss a beat. Every single episode is delivered right to your mobile device. And in addition, that you rate the show and you comment on the show. So let us know what a good job we're doing. Helps with placement wherever the podcast can be found. So just take a couple of those moments. Greatly appreciated by me. And you can find my work regularly at thisisinfamous.com. That's right, thisisinfamous.com. Whether it's written, video, or audio, you can find awesome work at thisisinfamous.com. So make sure you check me out there. I've been your host, Billy Donnelly. This has been Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. Hope you enjoy Backlash this weekend. Hope you enjoy UFC 203. Go CM Punk. I'm rooting for you. And I'll be back next week to talk at length about more wrestling as part of another intelligent conversation. So have yourself a pleasant immediate future. I'm out for now. Peace. Intelligent Wrestling Conversation has been a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.